Montana Territory, 1875. The wind swept across the prairie like a restless spirit, carrying dust and whispered promises of rain that rarely came. In this unforgiving land stood Wade Prescott, 25 years old, and already wearing the weathered expression of a man who'd learned to expect disappointment. The small homestead he'd built with his own hands over the past 3 years sat nestled against a gentle slope, the modest cabin and barn barely qualifying as a ranch by most standards. But it was his, paid for with backbreaking labor and stubborn determination. Wade leaned against the rough-hewn porch post, his lean frame tense despite his casual posture. His features, handsome beneath a light stubble, remained fixed on the distant trail that wound its way through the golden grassland. His green eyes narrowed against the setting sun as he absently ran a hand through his sandy brown hair. "You're a fool, Prescott," he muttered to himself, straightening the collar of his clean but well-worn cotton shirt. He had spent the morning scrubbing himself raw in the creek, an unusual concession to vanity for a man who typically had no one to impress but his horses and the occasional traveling salesman. Wade had long ago convinced himself that the frontier was no place for tenderness. He had seen too many broken men, destroyed not by the elements or outlaws, but by the loss of wives and children to disease, childbirth, or the simple crushing weight of frontier isolation. Better to remain alone than to bring someone into this hardship only to watch them wither or die. The thought of such responsibility, of such potential for heartbreak, had kept him solitary even as neighboring homesteads filled with families. Yet here he stood, waiting for a stagecoach carrying a woman who had answered his reluctantly posted advertisement for a mail-order bride. In a moment of weakness, or perhaps clarity, after a particularly brutal winter alone, he had written to a matrimonial agency back east. His letter had been practical to the point of coldness. He sought a sturdy, sensible woman who understood frontier hardships and wouldn't expect romance or luxury. He had emphasized his modest means and the difficult conditions. Wade had deliberately tried to discourage anyone with delicate sensibilities or romantic notions. Just need a partner, he reminded himself firmly. Someone to help with the cooking and the chickens. Nothing more. But the nervous fluttering in his stomach betrayed him. Despite his protestations, some small part of him hungered for more than mere survival. The distant rumble of wheels broke the prairie silence. Wade straightened, instinctively checking that his cabin was presentable, that the small bouquet of wildflowers he'd reluctantly picked sat prominently on the table inside. The stagecoach appeared on the horizon, a dust cloud announcing its approach long before the vehicle itself became visible. Wade swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Remember," he whispered to himself, "she's coming for practicality, not passion. Don't go getting ideas about things that don't belong out here." The stagecoach pulled up with a creak of leather and wood. Wade stepped forward, his hat in his hands, rehearsing the polite but restrained greeting he had planned. The driver, a weathered man named Hank who ran this route monthly, gave Wade a knowing grin. "Special delivery, Prescott," he called, jumping down to open the coach door. Wade nodded stiffly, eyes fixed on the opening door. His carefully constructed words died in his throat when Lily Daniels stepped into the late afternoon light. She was nothing like the practical, plain woman he had expected, had requested. At 22 years old, Lily Daniels was strikingly beautiful, with golden blonde hair that caught the sunlight in ways that made his chest tighten. Her deep blue eyes regarded him with an intelligence and directness that made him instantly self-conscious. She wore a simple traveling dress of pale blue cotton, dusty from the journey, but still somehow elegant. Despite the obvious fatigue of travel, she stood straight, one gloved hand clutching a small valise, the other holding her bonnet that had been removed once the coach stopped. "Mr. Prescott?" Her voice carried a gentle southern lilt that made his name sound like something precious. Wade realized he was staring and quickly fumbled with his hat. "Miss Daniels." "Yes, I'm Wade Prescott." He stepped forward awkwardly. "Welcome to Sage Creek Ranch." Hank was already unloading her trunk. "Got room for one more passenger, so I'll be heading out right quick, Wade." He glanced meaningfully between them, his smile suggesting he thought Wade had gotten more than he bargained for. Lily turned to Wade, her expression composed but uncertain. "Is something wrong, Mr. Prescott? You seem surprised." No, Wade said hastily, moving to take her small valise. The journey must have been difficult. Please, come inside. As he led her toward the cabin, Wade felt a rising panic. This woman, with her fine features and delicate beauty, didn't belong in his rough world. She would wither here like a hothouse flower transplanted into rocky soil. Worse, she would inevitably attract attention from every unmarried, and likely some married, men within 50 miles. What had the agency been thinking, sending someone so obviously unsuited to frontier life? The moment they entered his small cabin, Wade's awareness of its shortcomings intensified. The single room served as kitchen, dining room, and living area, with a curtained-off sleeping alcove in the corner. Everything was meticulously clean. He had spent days preparing, but undeniably humble. "It's not much," he said stiffly, setting her valise down. "I added the lean-to last summer for storage. I thought, that is, if you decide to stay, I would build an addition. For your privacy." Lily stood in the center of the room, her eyes taking everything in. When she turned to him, her smile was genuine but tinged with something he couldn't read. Determination, perhaps. "Your letter was very forthright about the conditions," she said carefully. "I appreciate honesty above all things, Mr. Prescott." Wade shuffled uncomfortably. "Miss Daniels, there may have been a mistake. The agency clearly misunderstood what I was looking for." Her smile faltered. "And what exactly were you looking for, Mr. Prescott?" "Someone more." He gestured vaguely, unable to say plain or common to her face. "Someone better suited to this life." Lily's chin lifted slightly. "You mean someone less refined? Less educated? Less attractive?" Wade flushed. "I mean someone who won't be miserable here. Someone who won't regret coming the moment winter hits and we're snowed in for weeks. Someone who won't," he stopped himself before saying, "break my heart when you inevitably leave." "Mr. Prescott," Lily said, removing her gloves deliberately, "perhaps you should allow me to decide what will make me miserable." Before Wade could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. A horse whinnied in distress, and Wade instinctively moved to the window. His prize mare, heavily pregnant, was down in the small corral, clearly in labor but struggling. "Excuse me," he said urgently. "I need to." "Of course," Lily nodded, already moving to follow him. "How can I help?" Wade paused at the door, startled. "You don't need to, Mr. Prescott," she interrupted firmly. "I grew up on a horse farm in Virginia. Now, shall we help your mare, or would you prefer to waste time questioning my capabilities?" For the first time since her arrival, Wade truly looked at her, not just at her beauty, but at the strength and determination in her eyes. Without another word, he nodded and they hurried to the corral together. The next 3 hours transformed Wade's perception of Lily Daniels. She removed her fine traveling dress, working in her petticoat without a hint of self-consciousness. Her hands proved steady and knowledgeable as they worked together to turn the breech full and ease its delivery. She spoke soothingly to the distressed mare, her presence as calming to the animal as it was unsettling to Wade. When the foal finally emerged, slick and struggling, into the world, Lily's face broke into a radiant smile that caught Wade completely off guard. She helped clear the newborn's airways, her sleeves rolled up, arms covered to the elbows in birthing fluid without a single complaint. "She's beautiful," Lily whispered as the wobbly-legged foal attempted its first stand. In the lantern light, with strands of her golden hair escaping from her once neat bun and her face flushed with exertion and joy, Lily Daniels was the most beautiful thing Wade had ever seen. And that terrified him. "Thank you for your help," he said stiffly, once they had ensured both mare and foal were doing well. "You should rest now. It's been a long day." Lily studied his face, her own expression falling slightly at his formal tone. "Of course. Thank you for allowing me to assist." Back in the cabin, Wade insisted Lily take his bed behind the curtain while he made a pallet near the fireplace. As he lay awake, listening to her soft breathing, Wade confronted the uncomfortable truth. Lily Daniels was exactly what he wanted, but everything he feared. Someone who could thaw the ice around his heart only to shatter it completely when she inevitably realized she deserved better than a struggling rancher with little to offer but hard work and harder winters. For her part, Lily spent that first night wondering what she had done wrong. Wade Prescott was not what she had expected either. Younger, more handsome, and far more guarded than his straightforward letter had suggested. She had come prepared for frontier hardship, not emotional barricades. As sleep finally claimed her, she resolved to prove herself capable not just of surviving the Montana wilderness, but of reaching the man who seemed determined to remain as untamed as the land itself. The following weeks established an uneasy rhythm. Wade built a small addition to the cabin with remarkable speed, providing Lily with her own private space. He worked from dawn to dusk, throwing himself into ranch tasks with an intensity that left little room for conversation. Lily took charge of the household, establishing a vegetable garden, managing the chickens, and transforming the sparse cabin into something that began to feel like a home. Their interactions remained polite but distant, sharing meals in relative silence broken only by practical discussions about the ranch. Wade deliberately avoided looking at her directly, afraid of the warmth her presence ignited in him. Lily, for her part, watched him when he wasn't aware, trying to reconcile the gentle way he handled animals with the emotional walls he maintained with her. The turning point came on a sweltering July afternoon. Wade was mending fences in the north pasture when Lily appeared, carrying a canteen of water and a cloth-covered basket. "I thought you might need refreshment," she said, setting the basket down in the shade of a lone cottonwood. "It's too hot to work through midday without rest." Wade straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thank you, but I'm fine. There's still much to do before sundown." Lily sighed, her patience visibly fraying. "Mr. Prescott, you should call me Wade," he interrupted, surprising himself. "If you're staying, that is." "Am I staying?" she challenged, stepping closer. "You've barely spoken 10 words to me some days. I've been here nearly a month, and I still don't know if you want me to remain or if you're simply too honorable to send me away." Wade looked away, unable to meet her intense gaze. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me," Lily insisted. "Because I came here ready to build a life, to be a partner to a man who wanted the same. Instead, I feel like an unwelcome guest in what's supposed to be my home too." "You don't belong here," Wade said finally, the words tearing from him. "Look at you. You're educated, refined, beautiful." The last word came out almost accusingly. "The first time you go into town, every man there will wonder what you're doing with someone like me. And they'd be right to wonder." Lily's expression softened. "Is that what this is about? You think I'm too good for you?" "I think you're too good for this life," Wade corrected, gesturing to the harsh landscape around them. "Winter's coming in a few months. The snow will pile higher than your head. We'll be trapped here, possibly for weeks. The wind howls so loud some nights you think you might go mad from the sound. Everything becomes a fight for survival. And you think I can't handle that? I think you shouldn't have to." Lily stepped closer, her blue eyes fierce. "Mr. Prescott, Wade, I came here with open eyes. Yes, I was raised with certain advantages, but my family lost everything in the war. Our plantation was burned, my father died, my brothers scattered to the winds. For the past 5 years, I've been a governess to a family who treated me like furniture. Do you know why I answered your advertisement?" Wade shook his head, transfixed by the passion in her voice. "Because you were honest. Your letter didn't promise luxury or ease. It promised partnership, hard work, yes, but with purpose, building something that belongs to us, not serving someone else's dreams." She took a deep breath. "And because when you described this place, this hard, beautiful land, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the war. I felt like I could breathe again." Wade stared at her, seeing her anew, not as a delicate flower but as someone who had weathered her own storms. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "You never asked," she replied simply. "You decided who I was the moment you saw me, just as surely as everyone else always has." The truth of her words struck him like a physical blow. He had been so certain of his own perceptions, so sure that someone like her couldn't possibly fit into his lonely existence, that he hadn't bothered to discover who she really was. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but sincere. A small smile touched her lips. "Well, that's a start. Now come eat something before you collapse from heat and stubbornness." That shared meal under the cottonwood became a turning point. As they sat in the dappled shade, Wade began to truly listen, learning about Lily's life before Montana, her childhood in Virginia, the devastation of the war, the years of quiet desperation that followed. In turn, he found himself speaking of things he rarely discussed: his parents' death from influenza when he was 18, his journey west with nothing but determination, and his father's pocket watch, the bone-deep loneliness that had been his constant companion. "I convinced myself it was better this way," he admitted as they watched the sun begin its descent. That attachment just meant eventual pain. Lily's hand found his, her touch light but certain. "Pain finds us all, Wade. The question is whether we face it alone or together." Something fragile and tender unfurled in Wade's chest, a sensation so foreign that it nearly made him pull away. But Lily's hand remained steady in his, anchoring him to a possibility he had never allowed himself to consider, that shared hardship might be easier to bear than solitary suffering. The following weeks brought subtle but significant changes. Wade no longer avoided Lily's gaze across the dinner table. Their conversations extended beyond the practical needs of the ranch. He began including her in decisions about livestock and crop planning, valuing her thoughtful perspective. Lily, in turn, shared her dreams for the homestead, a larger garden, perhaps beehives next summer, maybe even a small schoolhouse someday when there were more families in the area. One evening as summer began yielding to early autumn, Wade returned from town with supplies and an unexpected package. "What's this?" Lily asked as he placed a paper-wrapped parcel on the table. "Open it," he said, an unfamiliar nervousness in his voice. Lily carefully unwrapped the package to reveal 3 books, a volume of poetry, a novel, and a practical guide to Western botany. She looked up at him, eyes bright with surprise. "You mentioned missing books," Wade explained, suddenly self-conscious. "The selection in town isn't much, but I thought." He didn't finish because Lily had risen from her chair and, without hesitation, pressed her lips to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for remembering something so small." It wasn't small to Wade. It was everything. The realization that he wanted to know her completely, to understand what brought her joy and sadness, to be the cause of her smiles rather than her disappointment. As September painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, Wade and Lily settled into a comfortable rhythm that began to feel like partnership. They worked side by side during daylight hours and spent evenings planning improvements to the ranch. Sometimes, Lily would read aloud from one of her books while Wade carved pieces for a chess set he was making. These quiet moments, filled with her melodious voice and the crackling fire, became precious to him. Yet Wade still kept a certain distance, hesitant to fully embrace the feelings growing between them. Their legal status remained ambiguous. They had arrived together at a mutual understanding that they would wait to formalize their arrangement until they were both certain. Everything changed on the first truly cold day of autumn. Wade had ridden out at dawn to check on straying cattle, concerned about early snowfall in the high country forcing predators down toward their grazing land. When dark clouds gathered unexpectedly fast, he turned for home, pushing his horse harder as the temperature plummeted. The storm hit with vicious speed, turning the air white with swirling snow. Wade lost sight of familiar landmarks within minutes. His experienced eye recognized the danger immediately. This was no ordinary early storm, but a deadly blizzard that could claim lives if he didn't find shelter quickly. Visibility reduced to mere feet, Wade relied on his horse's instincts and his own intimate knowledge of the land. After what felt like hours fighting through the mounting drifts, the dim outline of the cabin appeared through the whiteness. Relief surged through him until he realized the barn door was open, swinging wildly in the wind. Lily must have gone to check on the animals when the storm approached. Wade's heart lurched with fear as he dismounted, struggling toward the barn against the howling wind. Inside, lantern light revealed Lily securing the last of the frightened horses, her face pale with cold but determined. "Wade," she spotted him with visible relief. "I was worried you wouldn't make it back. We need to get to the house," he shouted over the wind's roar. "This storm is dangerous, worse than anything I've seen this early in the season." Together they ensured the animals had water and feed, then prepared to make the short but perilous journey to the cabin. Wade wrapped his coat around Lily despite her protests, and they stepped into the blinding whiteness, arms linked to avoid separation. The wind cut like knives through their clothing. 20 yards felt like 20 miles as they struggled through deepening snow. Wade kept Lily close against his side, shielding her as best he could from the worst of the gale. When she stumbled, he lifted her without hesitation, carrying her the final distance to the cabin door. Once inside, Wade immediately stoked the fire while Lily, shivering violently, changed into dry clothing. He prepared hot coffee laced with whiskey, pressing the mug into her trembling hands when she emerged in her warmest dress, wrapped in a quilt. "You could have frozen to death," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he sat beside her on the bench near the fire. "Why did you go to the barn?" "The animals needed securing," she answered simply. "And I was worried about you out there." Wade stared at her. This woman who had faced a deadly blizzard without hesitation, not for herself, but for the creatures in her care and for him. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in his understanding. "I've been a fool," he said quietly. Lily looked up, questioning. "I've spent so long convinced that loving someone out here was too great a risk," Wade continued, his voice gaining strength. "That the frontier would eventually take everything I cared about. But today I realized something." "What?" Lily whispered. "That the real risk is never loving at all." He took her hands in his. "When I couldn't see the cabin through the snow, all I could think about was getting back to you. Not the ranch, not the animals. You." Lily's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I've been waiting for you to realize that. I want you to stay, Lily. Not as my housekeeper or helper, but as my wife. If you'll have me." "Is that a proposal, Wade Prescott?" she asked, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "The most sincere one a man ever made," he answered, suddenly certain in a way he had never been before. Lily leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "Then my answer is yes. It has been from the moment I stepped off that stagecoach." Wade kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing passion as the storm raged outside. For 3 days, the blizzard held them captive in their small cabin, time that became precious as they planned their future and explored the feelings they had both kept restrained. When the storm finally broke, they emerged to a transformed landscape, pristine white as far as the eye could see, beautiful and challenging in equal measure. Just like their life would be, Wade realized. Not easy, never that, but infinitely more meaningful shared with someone who understood both the beauty and the hardship. They married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, Lily wearing a dress she had carefully preserved from her journey west, Wade in his best shirt with a new waistcoat purchased for the occasion. The small gathering of neighbors seemed surprised but approving of the match, though Wade noticed more than one envious glance from the single men of the area. "Are you having regrets yet?" Wade asked teasingly as they drove the wagon home through the crisp autumn afternoon. Lily smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Only that we waited so long." Winter came early that year, just as the old-timers had predicted. Snow piled in drifts against the cabin walls, and the wind howled across the prairie with vengeful force. But inside their small home, Wade and Lily created warmth that defied the elements. They spent long evenings planning spring plantings, Wade teaching Lily to play chess on his handmade set, Lily reading aloud by lamplight. The cabin addition Wade had built as a barrier between them became their shared bedroom, filled with laughter and whispered confidences and passion that surprised them both in its intensity. The isolation that Wade had once dreaded became precious time to build a foundation for their life together. When spring finally arrived in a rush of melting snow and prairie wildflowers, Wade and Lily faced it as true partners. They expanded the garden together, built a proper chicken coop, and began construction on a larger barn that would accommodate their growing herd. Lily started a small school for the children of neighboring homesteads one afternoon each week, while Wade's expertise with horses brought increasing respect from the community. A year to the day after Lily's arrival, they stood together on the porch of their improved cabin, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and pink. Lily's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, their first child due when winter returned. "Are you afraid?" Wade asked softly, his arm around her waist. "Of what winter might bring this time?" Lily looked up at him, her blue eyes serene. "No. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. That's what makes the difference between surviving and living." Wade gazed across their ranch, the new barn, the expanded corral, the garden bursting with early summer vegetables. All tangible proof of what could be built when you dared to believe in something beyond mere survival. "When I sent that letter east," he said, "I thought I was just looking for someone practical. Someone common who would fit into my small life without disrupting it. And instead you got me," Lily teased, leaning into his embrace. "Instead I got everything I never believed I could have." Wade turned her gently to face him. "You were too beautiful for me, Lily Prescott. Too good, Too brave, too everything. But somehow, you were exactly what I needed. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Wade finally understood the truth that had eluded him for so long. The frontier wasn't a place where love couldn't survive. It was a place where love was most essential. The harshness of the land didn't diminish love's power. It magnified it, making it as necessary as shelter, as sustaining as water, as life-giving as the sun itself. In the years that followed, the Prescott Ranch grew and prospered. Their family expanded with the birth of 3 children who learned early the values of hard work, resilience, and the transformative power of love in the face of adversity. The community around them flourished as well, with Sage Creek eventually becoming a proper town with a permanent school where Lily sometimes taught. Through blizzards and droughts, through prosperity and hardship, Wade and Lily remained each other's cornerstone. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and their children were settled, they would sometimes sit together on the porch of the large, comfortable home they had built, looking out over the land that had shaped them. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade would sometimes ask, "Coming west to marry a stranger?" And Lily would always answer the same way, with a smile that still took his breath away. "How could I regret finding exactly where I belong?" For that was the true gift they had given each other, not just love or family or even the successful ranch, but the profound certainty of belonging. In each other's arms, they had both finally come home.